Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5, part 2 of the Give 'em Heck podcast. This is your host, Penny. I'm Brian, and I'd like to, first of all, thank all of the returning viewers. We're happy to have you back, and welcome to any new viewers. We're very happy to have you as well. Hopefully, we can get some more interesting subjects covered today on part 2.
Yes, I think we do have an interesting topic tonight, and like Brian said, thank you for joining. We've been getting a lot of good feedback and responses from people, so I'm really happy to hear that. That was the whole purpose of doing this, was to help others, and we just hope that we can continue to encourage you to move forward in whatever situation that you find yourself in. So,
Absolutely.
Again, tonight, just to let you know with our disclaimer, we're not doctors, psychologists, or counselors. We're not giving any medical or psychological advice. We're just simply here to deal with real life situations to give hope, encouragement, and hope for change. So I guess we'll get right into it. Last week in episode 5, part 1, we discussed time has a way. And although you might love it or hate it, whether it's your friend or your foe, the truth is that it's always there. You may not be able to change it. You can definitely learn from it. We talked about how time has a way of taking care of a lot of things.
Absolutely.
Good, bad, or ugly. So in today's episode, we entitled it Redeeming Your Time. And what this means. So I'm going to ask you, Brian, right out of the gate, when I ask you, what does redeeming your time mean to you?
Well, again, basing it off personal experience, when you tell me to redeem my time, it basically, to me, makes it feel like you're telling me to use the time that I have wisely based on past experiences. Like you're redeeming, what you've already gone through. It's kind of like redeeming bottles, right?
Okay.
You've already used,
Right.
you've already drank the soda out of it.
I like that.
And then when you say redeem the time, you're saying get some value out of that time that you lost with the time that you have left.
Wow. That's really good insight. I always love asking you those questions. And I will tell you viewers out there that Brian and I never discuss the topic that we're going to have for the next episode. Whether he prepares it or I prepare it, we have agreed to not discuss it because I don't want it to be a planned thing. And that's one of the things, and we'll get back to the topic, believe me, that's one of the things that I like about what we're hearing from people is they say how real and genuine it is. How we just sit here and we talk and it's not made up, it's not fake. And that's what I love about it, because when I ask you these questions, I never know what you're going to say. And then sometimes I hold my breath, but I love that analogy that you use, because I never thought about the bottles at all. Like my whole thought of it was totally different than yours.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been told I'm very good at giving analogies when it comes to certain sayings and topics. And as soon as you said that, I'm thinking, well, it's like redeeming bottles and cans.
Wow.
You can't get the soda back from the can. So when you say redeem it, you're cashing it in. You're using the can wisely by getting some money back for it. And it works the same way with, redeeming the time. You can't get the time back you lost.
Nope.
But you can use that
Right.
to further your experiences down the road with the time that's in front of you.
Right, because time is a learning experience, right? It shapes us who we want to be.
Absolutely.
And another part of what you're saying, this is how I think of it too, like you can't put the soda or whatever you had in that can back in there, but you can reuse the can.
Yeah, that's another
Instead
way
of
to look
turning
at
it back in for money, right? You could.
I would almost consider that more of not so much redeeming, but repurposing. Like you used it for soda at one point, now you're using it for water. You're giving it another purpose. So essentially using past experiences to maybe alter the way you deal with experiences that you'll deal with in the future.
So maybe changing the outcome of something you went through.
Or changing the perspective.
Yes. Because a lot of people, and I talked to one of my coworkers today, She said, if you could go back in time, do you think you would have done the same things that you already did? I said, well, it depends. If you're talking about going back in time where you were not knowing what you know now, or going back in time knowing what you know now. It's a big difference, right? I mean, you only did what you did with the knowledge that you had, with the experiences that you had already lived up to that point. But if you were to go back in time right now, knowing what you know, would you have made different choices? I don't know.
I can definitively sit here and say that anybody that tells you if they live their life differently, they're probably not telling you the truth.
Why do you say that?
Because people make mistakes every day, and oftentimes people make the same mistakes every day.
It's true.
You don't change who you are as a person. You change your outlook. There's a difference between changing who you are, like the way you react to situations. It takes a lot for a person to really get yourself out of your comfort zone, out of your bubble, to redo situations that you've dealt with in the past. And I'm not talking about small things, like last week when I went up the stairs, I took 3 steps and fell backwards. I'm not going to do that again. I learned from it, But we put ourselves in high stress situations or very emotional situations.
Okay.
Oftentimes people make the same mistakes, not because they're bad people. It's just because that's just
who you are.
That's who you are.
And to change that person, because we've talked about that before, where changing your situation and changing yourself is very hard because we do like comfort.
Yeah, we don't like to change ourselves. Not because we feel that we're bad people, but like my situations or things that I've gone through in my life. I can't even begin to sit here and tell you, in spite of me being a different person now than I was, 5 years ago,
Sure.
I still make the same mistakes. I'm still who I am. Mm-hmm. The only difference is becoming self-aware of yourself, not letting yourself get to a place where you're kind of on autopilot through situations. It's like, okay, I dealt with a situation a certain way at one point in time. Let me see if I can't use the perspective change to not necessarily change the way I react to a situation, but maybe change the way the outcome is.
So that's the key, is perspective.
Yeah, because you can use anger, for example. People are often like, oh, you need to change how you are because you're very angry. Well, instead of maybe thinking about how you can change your anger, maybe you can think about how you can use your anger to the advantage of your situation. Because there is such a thing as righteous anger.
True.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You can use emotions, which everybody has.
Mm-hmm.
You can use it in different ways. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes people will get upset with you because you're not reacting the same way they are. We talked about that in prior podcast episodes. Right. But you can use that. It's not that you're worse or better for doing it. You are using yourself. That's who you are. Mm-hmm. Don't bash yourself over the head because you didn't react the same way somebody else did. Learn from the experiences, but use yourself to push yourself further ahead and be like, okay, before I was just angry. I'm angry again, but let me see if I can't channel that anger.
Okay. So instead of maybe reacting, you're acting differently.
I would say probably not so much that, but maybe instead of just reacting, you're using purpose. There's drive.
There's reason.
There's reason.
That's good. That's good. Wow. That was good. Okay, we're going to keep going. So although time and situations themselves can't be changed, which we just said, I believe you can redeem time by taking back what you have lost. So what does that look like and how's that done? So let's get into it. I believe it has to do first of all with choosing to be thankful. That's where I think the first step comes in.
Yeah, I just want to add to that because it's funny you say that because that's what I tell my friends all the time. Like we talk about losing friends, losing family and stuff like that. And I even told you this, but it's like instead of being bitter about the situation, be thankful for what you had.
Right. And we talked about that with Nana because that was one of the things I could never get past and it was making me angry for the most part, was how do you go on with that loss and changing that situation to better yourself. And then you said to me one day, because I had asked you, I said, well, why didn't you cry at the funeral? I just never seen you really break down. And you said, because I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I'm looking at it from, I'm trying to remember the memories that Nana and I had together that made it a good time for us.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first part of redeeming your time is, and this is just me, you can give me your input, obviously. For me, I think when I say redeeming your time, obviously you can't bring that time back into play. You can't bring somebody back into your life that's either gone because they've passed away, or maybe that situation has caused them to leave your life because of a breakup or a divorce or something like that. It is what it is, right? Mm-hmm. But you have to move on for yourself, right? So I think by looking at it of as perspective, again, as being thankful, I think that's the first thing. Because it takes care of a lot of hurts too, right? When you're thankful for the times that you've had together, instead of always wallowing in that, I don't want to maybe call it self-pity, maybe it is, I don't know, depending on the situation. But being thankful makes you remember the good times, but it brings you into a better place. Because you're not responsible for other people. No matter if that situation turned out to be ugly, it is what it is. So, and if you want to add anything at any time, please feel free. So secondly, I believe, along with being thankful, I believe that it has to do with forgiveness. And this one's rough. I think being thankful can be hard because you have to put your mindset somewhere else. Mm. And sometimes we tend to not want to think thankfully or be thankful because maybe that we feel that change is going to be a little bit too much to move on. But with forgiveness, I think this is a much harder place because, and when I say forgiveness, I'm not only talking about forgiveness towards yourself, but towards others. What do you think's harder, Brian? Forgiving yourself or forgiving others?
That's a good question. I would probably say that, and I'm only using my own personal experiences to say this. I think it's more about the harder thing for me is forgiving myself. And I can say that because whatever happened in a situation, mm-hmm. if that other person decided to make their own decisions and either, leave or whatever, obviously I respect what they do. It's like, you want to leave, you want to move on, be my guest. I will not stop you. Mm-hmm. But then I think to myself, did I act right? Did I do the right thing? And then the longer I sit on it, it's not so much like I'm having a fight with myself, but I'm just thinking about how the situation went through one by one and be like, the more I stopped and thought about it, it's like, what good would it do me to not forgive myself? Mm-hmm. Because even if I was wrong in a certain situation, it's like I said earlier, it's learning from past experiences, right. Being self-aware,
right?
Knowing that mistakes were made, mm-hmm. whether it was on both sides or one or the other. Mm-hmm. It is what it is.
Yep.
And you have to learn from that. Mm-hmm. And the next time a situation like that rolls around, even if I act the same way, I have to stick to my guns and be like, I know I'm not perfect.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But whatever the circumstance is, either the other person has to respect who I am as a person and be like, this is just how he is, or be like, this isn't going to work. And then we both walk away respectfully.
Right.
Because no one has any control over a situation. You only have control over yourself.
Exactly. And I think sometimes I think there's a mix. Like you were saying, you have a harder time forgiving yourself. For me, I have a harder time forgiving others. And I don't say that out of haughtiness or pride. I just look at it from, I'm trying to better myself. But when I say I have a harder time forgiving others, is because, and I'm only being honest, I'm not saying I don't, I just have a harder time doing it. I think because I wish I could have changed that situation. I look at it and I think, well, why couldn't you have just done this? It would have made it so much easier if you would have just. And I can look at myself and say that too. Maybe there were things that I could have changed, but I look at it and I think, if you would have just done this, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. Does that make sense?
It does, and I guess the question I'd have to ask you is, like, with knowing mistakes that you made in the past, or things like that, if you know you reacted wrong then, and I'm getting to a point, but like, why is it that people make the same mistakes multiple times? And I mean the same mistakes.
Are you asking me to answer that?
Not really. It's more of a rhetorical question, but it's a very interesting concept. This is why I said earlier that people don't change. They can change many different things about themselves, but oftentimes people are they're set in their ways, like I am. I'm going to be the way that I am unless something drastic happens.
Right.
But as I sit right now, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with that. If people don't like how I handle certain situations, mm-hmm. that's not my fault. Mm-hmm. And what good does it do for them to blame me and make me feel bad about myself for acting the way that I do? Because I'm going to react to a similar situation the same way no matter what.
Right.
This is why when I was younger, I didn't like how people treated me, because people would always assume that because I was quiet, that I was different. What they didn't realize is I was sitting there observing.
You're a thinker.
I was observing.
I know.
This is why I'm very good at getting people in conversations and just make them stop and think.
You are. You're very much a thinker. You're an observer, and you've always been that way.
So that's why I say people don't change.
Well, and people take quiet a lot of times, Brian, as a weakness, when it's actually quite the opposite.
I would, based on my personal experience, the people that I've met that are just like me can be very intelligent. Mm-hmm. They can be very sharp.
Well, you think things through.
Yeah.
I know that about you.
They have a lot of foresight.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the people that talk the most are the people that either just like to hear themselves talk, frankly, or they really don't know what's going on. They just like to word salads.
The busyness.
Yeah.
The busyness. Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the case every single time.
Right. No. It always depends on your situation and who you are.
Well, like I said, the example I just gave was literally just based on my personal experience.
Right. And you should never apologize for who you are. You're built a certain way, and that's how you're built, right?
I think that goes into flow with the way that people judge each other. Why don't you act like I do? Why should I?
Well, and why would we want it that way? I wouldn't want everybody to be like me.
Oh, God. But yeah, no. We're not machines.
And isn't that good? Isn't that nice?
We're not machines.
And that's the good part of it is free will.
Yeah, whether any of our viewers watching believe in the concept of free will or not, personally, regardless of what you believe, you can choose to do certain things in your life.
Right.
You can choose to act a certain way and think a certain way, but regardless of what your personal decision is, it's going to be different from the person next to you, and that has to be okay.
It does have to be okay, because again, it's all based on perspective. I remember in college, we had a debate in the classroom one time, and finally the professor just said, because there was a lot of people that were just disagreeing and we're going back and forth and we weren't really getting anywhere. It was just kind of like, oh my word. And finally she just said, and it was kind of profound in a way, but she just said, you know what, guys? We can just agree to disagree. We're going to agree to disagree. And that's okay. You don't want everybody to think like you do. And that's the problem with the world today, why there's so much discord and so much hate and so much separation and just, what a mess. It's just because everybody expects everybody to believe the way they do or do what they do or think how they think. You know what? as an individual, I think it's great that you can think out your situations differently, because you can glean off of each other that way. Like I go to you or I go to your dad or whoever, and I talk about certain things, and you give me a different perspective. You give me a different insight on a situation that maybe I've never thought of before. But if we were all the same, those things would never happen.
Life would be bland.
Oh my word, it would be horrible. But like going back to the point of forgiveness, you had said that you have a harder time forgiving yourself. I have a harder time forgiving others. Again, it's all perspective. And I'm not saying that I don't always forgive people. I'm working on it because I it's important. I think you need to do that because that's one of the attributes I think of being able to redeem your time is sometimes you just have to let go.
Well, it's healthy.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
You know,
Because what good would it do you sitting there dwelling on it all the time?
well, especially if it's already been done. What are you going to do about it?
Well, at that point, you're only hurting yourself. And again, going off personal experiences, I can tell you that sometimes I've sat and dwelled on things more than the person that I was upset with was.
Right, and they're moving on.
So who am I hurting more? Am I hurting myself or am I hurting them? No, I'm hurting myself, obviously.
Right.
They don't care, so why should I? Mm-hmm. And it's not from like an angry perspective.
Right,
it's
right,
just
no.
like it's a letting go thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have to do that because I think in the letting go, in the forgiveness, whatever that looks like, because I think there's different levels of forgiveness. Wherever you're at with that level, it can bring you to a place of healing. And that's the other big part of it, right? Is the healing aspect of it. Mm. So, thirdly, I believe with the part of being thankful and forgiveness, I believe that this is where the change comes into. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a feedback of a movie. I'm not endorsing the movie. I've watched it, obviously, or I wouldn't know what I know. If you want to watch it, that's fine. That's up to you. But I remember in the movie Young Guns 2, Emilio Estevez, he was playing Billy the Kid. And at the beginning of the movie, this reporter comes to him and he asks Billy the Kid basically to prove himself, who he is. And he says to Billy, he says, well, don't you have any scars? And what happens in the movie is at that point, Billy takes him through, like the movie takes you through Billy the Kid's life, his experiences, and what he went through. And at the end of the movie, it goes back to him and the reporter, because Billy's a lot older now, like he's dying. Basically, he's dying, and he tells the reporter this, I'm dying. And at the end of the movie, Billy says, oh, I have scars. And he walks away. Now, the whole point of that was this. Billy was looking for a pardon. He wanted forgiveness that the governor had told him he could have years ago. He was looking for someone to put that out there so that the governor would give him a pardon. Mm. And when he told the reporter who he was, the reporter didn't believe him because he thought he was supposed to be dead, right? That was the way it was supposed to be. And at the end of the movie, Billy says, oh no, I have scars. But I think Billy was not talking about physical scars. The reporter wanted to see physical scars for him to prove who he was. Billy the Kid, when he said that to the reporter, he was talking about emotional scars. Mm. And I say that because that's where the forgiveness comes into play. One of the emotional scars that many people have, and we all deal with it, I'm sure, is regret. You know, that's a huge physical, or not physical, but like a mental, emotional scar. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm sure, Brian, you can look back on your life, and if I were to ask you that same question, do you have scars?
Yeah.
Physically, you can look at someone and see that, but emotionally, you can't see those emotional scars. And I think sometimes those go much, much deeper than the physical.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times people don't realize that some people's scars are bigger than others.
Deeper. Because some people, they feel more. And if you're a very feeling person, it doesn't take much to make a huge scar.
Yeah.
So that when you say that some people have deeper scars than others, that's what I thought of. Because some people wear their heart on their shoulder, right? On their sleeve.
Yeah.
And those types of scars are really hard to deal with and to get past those hurts, because you really feel, you're a deep feeler, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, the old saying goes, and I'll just say this from my point of view, is for my emotional scars, and I look at regrets, I know looking back on my life, trying to sit where I am today to be a better person, I know that there's a lot of things that I said and did to people that if I could take it back, I would. But can we all say that? Yeah, I think so, because I'll relate it to this, and it's not a cop-out when I say it, and I'm sure people have heard this saying before, but hurt people hurt people.
Misery loves company.
I didn't go out to be malicious, and a lot of people don't. But I think sometimes you just do and say things, and then later in life you realize that maybe I could have handled that differently. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I should have said it in a different way. So I think dealing with your scars is one thing that we have to do with the forgiveness, and we all have them. But I think it's what we do with those scars that matter.
Yeah.
Like we said last week, life can make you or break you. But I'm going to say with the scars thing, they can make you bitter or better. I mean, when you think of some of your scars, Brian, how do you think you can become better instead of bitter?
The way, it's a very interesting question, and maybe somebody else could answer it differently, but in my situation, or my case, I don't look at my scars and think how I can use them to make me a better person necessarily. I look at it more as, how can I use my scars to help make other people better?
Wow. What do you mean?
Like I told you earlier, I'm set in stone. I know how I'm going to react in certain situations.
Okay.
So I use the scars of my past to help somebody with similar scars move on.
Okay.
I use my scars as an experience for others.
Wow.
I put others before myself.
Nice.
Does it work all the time? No, I'm human. But you get my point.
Right.
I don't like to look at myself and think, how can I make myself better? Because I know that I'll never be perfect. The better that I look for is built through experience, not through my actions.
Oh, wow. That's a good way to think of it. I never thought of it like that, because when I was thinking about moving forward, about instead of becoming bitter but better, was more like, how do I better myself to help others? When you were thinking of it more like, your scars help other people to move on. That's not how I was thinking about. More, you know what I'm saying? Like healing me. Once I'm better, then I can help others. You're not looking at it like that.
No, because deep down, we can all still be broken.
Wow.
But what good does it do to hide under my scars and think what I could do differently to help an inevitability of another scar that'll pop up?
Because you'll never achieve.
You'll never achieve it. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying, if I was to summarize it, I'm perfect in my imperfection.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Wow. No, I think that's a great place to be, because people who think they can always strive to find perfection, knowing that you're never going to get there, I think is more of a burden.
Well, yeah, you're putting yourself to an unachievable standard. You'll never be perfect, but that's what makes you perfect.
So are you always good enough?
Bingo. You are always more than capable to help yourself move on and those around you, but it's more of a self-reflection and a realization that you are not going to be perfect because nobody is.
But you are good enough.
But you're good enough.
Wow. And there's your self-worth.
I was just about to say that.
Oh, my
actually.
word.
I was just, that's where you'll find
There's your self-worth.
That's where you'll
knowing
find your
you are good
self-worth.
enough. It doesn't mean you stop achieving and trying to be better, but knowing where you're at.
I guess it's more of like
That's-
where I come from with it is not so much that you shouldn't strive to be better, but I would, if I was to ask you, what are you trying to work towards? When is enough enough? When are you going to learn that limit that you hit? How much higher do you have to go before you finally say, I'm content?
So is it about finding peace with yourself?
Bingo.
Wow, I swear you read my notes because that is the next thing.
I really didn't.
No, you couldn't have because I hide them. You wouldn't even know where to find them. And that is the next thing that I have written down. It's all about moving forward and finding peace with yourself. It's not about being selfish. It's about finding your self-worth. Is that where your self-worth is? It's just realizing that you do your best.
That's it. If I was to summarize everything I just said, it's that doing your best is enough. And it's all anybody should ever expect of you. Because if they expect you to do more than your best, then at that point, they have left Earth and have gone to some other planet that doesn't exist that has an unachievable standard because it ain't here. You know?
So why does their expectation of you mean anything?
That right there, if somebody expects more of you, that is a projection of pride. Because to them, they think they can do better. Well, what makes you think you can do better? What makes you think you are better? You put your pants on in the morning the same way I do. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how many shiny cars you have in your parking lot. I don't care about the fake mask you put on every morning to hide the pain that is right under your skin that I have too.
Ow.
We're all human. And anybody who thinks they're better than anybody else, deep down, they are scared and alone. And they are only projecting onto you because they want you to feel the same way they do.
Ouch. Wow. You're not wrong. So in this process, you definitely can learn a lot about yourself and others.
Helping yourself learn, or helping yourself to learn about yourself can help you see the fake people around you and see who's hurting the most. It's not a matter of looking for somebody to hate. It's a matter of looking at somebody to be like, that person, see how fake they are? There's something wrong. They need help.
How do you feel when you see someone like that, Brian? Because you just said it's not about hate. What do you think? How do you feel when you see someone like that?
I actually have a story about that.
Okay, story
So,
time with Brian.
I actually met someone online. It's from England. Where I can't remember where he was from. Why am I thinking Wales? But anyway, him and I started playing on this game called Steel Hunters, and it was just me and him. We were in a public VC voice chat, so anybody could join. But for a long time, it was just me and him. Well, apparently his family was very wealthy. And I could tell based on the way he was talking. Like, basically, nothing was off limits to this guy.
Mm.
And I could tell just by listening to some of the things he was saying that it almost sounded like enough was never enough. So I asked him I was like, so how are you doing? And he just stops and goes, what do you mean? I'm doing great. And I said, no. How are you doing? And he didn't say anything for a minute. And he's like, are you asking me how I'm doing emotionally? And I said, it's more than that. How are you doing personally? And he just broke down. And I was like, what's wrong? He's like, no one's ever asked me that before. And I'm like, really?
Wow.
He was 23 years old. And I'm thinking, no one's ever asked you how you're doing? He's like, nobody's asked me like that. And then him and I just started talking for a while. By the end of it, it almost sounded like he was a completely different person.
Wow.
So you asked me you said what was my reaction when I see people like that?
Mm-hmm.
I empathize. Because I see the emptiness behind all of their glitter and sparkles.
Well, money doesn't buy peace. You can have all the money in the world you want, but at the end of the day, you're still going to lay your head down on your pillow just like I will.
And that's why I don't concede to anybody who thinks they're better than me, because I know deep down they're actually worse off than I am.
But it's nice that you are always willing to put out a willing hand, Brian.
And the stories like that don't come around often. It's very, very small percentage. Usually when I see people that are hurting like that, usually they're the ones that are very angry.
Yeah.
It's funny how they have everything in the world and yet they're just still so angry.
Well, it's never enough.
They find pleasure with material things.
No.
With vain things.
Yeah. That only lasts temporarily, though.
That's why there's a difference between joy and happiness.
It's true. It's very true. Yeah. Some of the happiest people have nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That was good. So in our last podcast, I love your insight. In our last podcast, we also talked about reason, reflection, and revelation. And the reason is your why. You're always asking why. Your reflection is when you go from why to what now. And your revelation is who you are now. So yes, the time has a way of healing all wounds. And although the scars may remain, we always have a choice of how we want to move forward in time, and especially in the time that we have left. You said that earlier. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, I know he read my notes. And this is one thing I want to say is that we kind of touched on it, but with the scars and the time that we have left and the healing and going from the why to the what to the who, it's not just about being. It's about becoming. You talked about who you are, but it's also about who you're becoming. It's knowing that you're not responsible for others, but you're only responsible for yourself. It's about finding your self-worth. It's about perspective, self-reflection, choices, and knowing at the end of the day that you can sit back and say, well, how do I better myself, or how do I better to help others? So I believe in the understanding that we all have to continue to not only better ourselves, but understand that we will continue to make mistakes. It's just life, right? We're all human, but it's about the time and the understanding that we give to each other that really matters. And you had said, that's why I had asked you, Brian, when you look at someone in that situation, you said, I don't look at them with hate. I look at them with empathy. I really appreciate the fact that you didn't say sympathy. I don't think there's anything wrong with sympathy, but sympathy doesn't help people for very long. After a while, it has to become empathy because it brings people up from the pit that they're in. Does that make sense? Like I know, and I always give this example because it's really one I've got, is like when mom and dad passed away, people gave a lot of sympathy. And that was for the time that it needed to be. But you don't want sympathy from people forever, because it's just going to keep you, like myself, would keep me down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But empathy, I think what that does is it brings you on a level playing field with someone. You know,
Brings you to a place where you can relate with the other person.
So with that being said, you can lift that person up. You know, it's like my cousin that I had told you about that, you know, right after Mom passed away, she was always there. She didn't, even though she sympathized, she gave me more empathy. And she always knew right what to say and when to say it, because it kind of put her on the same playing field.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So I appreciate the fact that you said that, because I think as humans, and we will make mistakes and continue to, it's all about the time and understanding that we give each other. And people don't like what they don't understand.
Yeah, it's true.
And I think that's a lot of the time where sympathy comes in, because when you don't understand what someone's going through, that's the only way you know how to act, is to give them sympathy. And we don't like that. We don't like that we don't understand what people are. We can say it, but until you've walked it, you really don't know. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think that's why when you said you have empathy for them, is because you've walked it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in one other thing with that, I think it finally comes down to surrendering. Just knowing that in that situation, you've done everything you can. You're continuing to heal. You're continuing to be better. But at some point, you just have to surrender. And what does that mean when I say that to you, Brian?
To me, surrendering is not so much just laying something down, right? I think it's more about finding peace. Being content, like I said earlier. Being content in yourself. It's more about a peace. When I surrender, I'm not fighting anymore. It's not giving up, but it's being content with where you're at. Being content with the scars that you have. Being content with the experiences you went through, good or bad. Because at the end of the day, it makes you the person that is standing there now. That's where you can build the experience from. And that's when you tell me what it means to surrender, that's what I think it means. Just stop fighting yourself. And I guess bask in the presence of your imperfection. You know.
And know that it's okay.
Yep.
Is it okay to do that even in the battle?
Sometimes doing that in the battle is necessary.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I heard a quote from somewhere. Oh, it's funny. It came from a video game, but
shocker.
But it was during a scene of a female soldier who was struggling with her orders, but her commander comes over and she's on the ground freaking out, and he puts his hand on her shoulder and says, "Sometimes the battle is stepping away from the battle." Do you get it?
No.
Stop fighting yourself.
So did she want to fight, or she didn't?
She didn't know what to do.
Oh, okay.
She was
that was
freaking
it.
out.
She didn't know what to do.
She didn't know what to do. And
Okay.
he said sometimes the battle is stepping away from it.
Okay. That's what Dad always said. Stepping away from it. Yeah.
Because sometimes you don't realize that the situation you're going through pales in comparison to the fight that's going on inside you. And that's what it more meant. Stop fighting yourself. Step away from that inner war and find peace.
Do you think this situation usually takes care of itself then?
Sometimes.
I think most times.
Depending on the situation, of course.
Right.
Sometimes action is required. But
well, and if other people are involved, and mostly they are, you're not responsible. You don't know what they're going to do. So that can put you in a whole different battle.
yeah.
But sometimes you have to just say enough. Eventually, you're going to hit that wall. I'm sorry. It's going to happen.
And that could mean many different things to a bunch of people. I know you didn't quite understand it first, but to me, when he said that line, I stopped and I thought, wow, that's big. Because they're facing insurmountable odds that nobody could ever, dream of tackling. And yet here's this one soldier struggling with herself, trying to figure out what to do. And then somebody of higher authority comes to her and says, basically, stop fighting, stand down. Because you're no use to me with the way that you are right now.
Yeah. And again, that has to be okay. Wow. A lot of it's in the mix, though, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's perspective, it's forgiveness, it's thankfulness, it's self-awareness, it's peace. It's finding self-worth. It's knowing you're good enough. There's a lot to think about. But it continues to make you the person you are, right? And you should never apologize for who you are or where you're at. You're in that situation where you're at because we all have a purpose. You're not on this earth just because, boom, you landed here. There's a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that purpose is found in part of who you are. It'll make you or break you, right?
I oftentimes think to myself, it's not so much that situations can help change you, it's situations help make you.
It's true.
It's like putting a puzzle piece together. As you age, you don't change. It's just more pieces are being put together to make you into the person that you finally are.
It is age. And again, I talked to my coworker about that today because she was talking about something and she's in her 20s. And I think it was values. We were talking about values. And I said, that's an age thing that you're dealing with. And she just looked at me. She knows how much older I am than her. And she said, I thought so. And I said, it is. I said, because in my 20s where you're at now, I said, I can understand why you think those things are so important. And not that they're not. I never told her that they weren't. I just said, I can understand that. I said, but looking at myself now, where I'm at, so many things of importance have changed. Because what I thought was important then is not as important as the things are now.
Which leads me to my thing. Did you become a different person, or did your perspective change?
Perspective.
Exactly. You're still the same person you were back when you were in your 20s, but your perspective changes over time. And you learn from the experiences to figure out what's more important, what isn't important, how to react a certain way. You didn't change who you are. You just changed your outlook.
Right. And again, life does that.
Life does that.
When you've sat and watched two parents pass away, which I'm sure a lot of you out there have been through traumatic things like that, life's going to change you. Family became a number one priority in my life after that happened. There was nothing. Family and friends became huge in my life because they mean a lot to me, because I know that life can be gone in a second.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good analogy, Brian, how you said that I haven't changed from the person I was in my 20s as a person, but my perspective on how I handle things now have changed because perspective has changed those things.
Yeah, it's true.
Excellent. Yeah, I like that. So I think unless you have any other questions, comments, or concerns, we're going to wrap that up here tonight.
No, I'm all set.
You're all set?
Yeah.
All right, so just to close out, we want to say thank you again. Again, share any comments that you have. Let us know your experiences. Let us know if there's anything that you'd like to talk about, if you like the podcast, if you don't. Also, again, we can be found on many different platforms like YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. As always, please like, share, subscribe, turn on notifications. And our email is givemhec@gmail.com. That's GIVEMHEC@gmail.com. And I think that's it for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Good night.
Good night.